Hi everyone, it's Amy. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to share with you the 19 books that I read in June. So let's get to it. Like I said, I read 19 books in June. And of those 19, 5 were adult audience, 1 was YA, and 13 were middle grade. I took part in Whatever-a-thon and I was on team middle grade Monarch. And so middle grade was on the docket. I read 7 physical books, 6 digital books, and 7 audiobooks, 17 fiction, and 2 nonfiction. I read 5,412 pages, which is a little bit low. It came out to about 285 pages per book and 180 pages per day, which I'm not upset about. And my average rating was 4.3 stars, which I'm very excited about. Some of my favorites this month were Alone by Megan Freeman, Hollowpox by Jessica Townsend, Cece and the Desert of Souls by Kayla Rivera, and What's Done in Darkness by Laura McHugh. So let me get my titles up. All right, so the first book that I completed in June was Twins by Varian Johnson and Shannon Wright. This was a really fun middle grade graphic novel about 2 girls, Maureen and Francine, who have drifted apart now that they're in middle school. It's told through Maureen's point of view, and so Francine's thoughts and ideas are very much a mystery through the whole book until they start to communicate better. So it's kind of a really cool way that it all comes together. It was a really fun, quick read. I bought it for my students because I knew that they would love it, and I had to read it because it was so darn cute, and it is so darn cute. The next book that I finished was an audiobook, and that was Lending a Paw by Laurie Cass. This was the book pick for the Cozy Escape Book Club, and it is the Bookmobile Cat Mystery. I really enjoyed this book. It did what a cozy mystery is supposed to do. It purely was entertaining. There were a couple things that were kind of weird to me, and so I didn't love it as much as I normally do. It wasn't the bookishness that I wanted to find after reading The Secret Book and Spoon Society, but it was still very enjoyable. I did like it, and I might continue reading on the series. The next book, this is one of my favorites, Alone by Megan E. Freeman. This is about a girl named Maddie. She's 12 years old, and one night she tells her mom she's staying at dad's house, and she's staying at mom's house, and she's gonna meet her friends at her grandparents' empty condo, and they're gonna have a sleepover. Her friends don't show up, and the next morning she wakes up and the whole town has been evacuated, and she is completely and totally alone. She has to navigate these waters of living and surviving by herself. It's very Island of the Blue Dolphins. It's very Hatchet-esque. I would say she has to scavenge for food. She finds a young friend in the neighbor's dog. And it's just beautifully written. It's written in verse, so it's very quick. And I just really, really enjoyed it. The next book that I finished was Hand in Hand by Katie Proctor. This was an ARC. It came out on June 8th, and I received a copy from Fox Press. Katie Proctor is the author of My Storied Year. It is a book that I have talked about a couple times at least on my channel. She is part of the same bookish community that I am online, the Currently Reading podcast, Bookish Friends. And I was lucky enough to get an ARC of her second book. It is wonderful. It takes place in South Carolina, 1945, historical fiction. We have Hazel, who is Black, and Lily, who is white. Hazel's grandmother works for Lily's family, and Hazel and Lily bond over the books that they're reading, and they become friends. And through their friendship, Lily's eyes are open to worlds of struggles that she didn't know were actually happening. It's beautifully written, and her author's note at the end is really beautiful and adds even more to the story. The next book that I finished was an audiobook, and that was Shadow Throne by Jennifer A. Nielsen. This was one of my disappointments of the month. Not too much of a disappointment. I still really enjoyed it. It is the third book in the Ascendance trilogy, so I'm not going to say much about what it's about. However, the first book, The False Prince, is one of my favorite books to talk about, one of my favorite YA fantasies to talk about. It's just wonderful. I love it. Suspense, twists, turns, everything. And the second book in the series, Runaway King, has a lot of the same things that I liked in it, but isn't as good as The False Prince, and The Shadow Throne took another step back. So I went from 5 stars to 4 stars to 3 stars. And I am good with the way this book ended. Now, the author did write, I think, 2 more books in the series after she concluded the trilogy. And I feel okay not continuing on with the rest of it. I don't know if I'm going to change my mind in the future. I might, but I feel okay with the fact that I haven't read the rest of them. The next book that I finished was Peak by Roland Smith. And I actually started this book as a read aloud with my 6th and 7th grade students, but we didn't get a chance to finish it by the end of the year, which is a shame because I really liked this book. And they were really enjoying the book before the year ended as well. It would have been really nice to get to finish it. We have Peak, that's his name, is in trouble with the law in New York, and he is going to be sent to like a detention center, but his father comes and says, hey, what if I just take him out of the country and he can come live with me? I run a base camp off of Mount Everest. I'm a mountain climbing guide. That turned into a good idea. They decided that that would work, and that's what happened. The book goes on from there. You learn a lot about mountain climbing that seems very factual. I'm not 100% sure that it's true, but I'm going to go ahead and say Roland Smith kind of knows what he's talking about, because he's pretty well known for having pretty informational books. So I really enjoyed it. I don't know that I would go on more. I guess this is a series. I don't know that I would continue it. However, I do like it. The next book that I finished was an ARC of The Islanders by Mary Alice Monroe and Angela May. I really enjoyed this book. This is about a 7th grader named Jake. And Jake's parents, Jake's mom sends him to live with his grandma for the summer on Dewey's Island because she is helping his father recuperate from a combat injury. He is very worried about his dad and dealing with a lot of anxiety there. Doesn't really want to go off to the island where his grandmother doesn't believe in TV or electronics or video games, but he goes because that's what you do when you're a military kid and you're a kid in general and don't really have a say. And he meets two friends, Macon and Lovey, and they have all kinds of adventures. Turtles play a really big part in the book as well, and it's just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and definitely bought a book copy for my classroom as well. Hollowpox is the next book that I finished. I listened to this as well as read some of it on my physical copy. This is the third book in the Nevermoor series by Jessica Townsend, and I love this series so much, and I will continue to read and love the series. In this one, there's a strange illness going through the Wanimals in the Nevermoor community. Think Zootopia with the mammals all coming down with some crazy disease and becoming savage. That's kind of the idea. Very engaging, very fun, and I loved it. The next book I finished was Donner Dinner Party. This is a nonfiction, historical, graphic novel series by Nathan Hale. He has just a ton of research behind his book. There's a little bit of a fantasy element that works to help tell the story, but it really is all nonfiction. And this is about, obviously, the Donner Party. It was really difficult to read, but so interesting to read. I really liked it. I will be looking for a copy of this for my classroom because I really think that my students would find this part of history interesting, and I might be teaching social studies in the future. So win-win. The next book that I finished was Arsenic and Adobo by Mia Manansala. This is a cozy mystery. I got it through Book of the Month, and it follows Leela, who is working at her aunt's restaurant and helping out after she had kind of a breakdown in her life in the big city. So she comes back home, she runs into her ex, he dies right in front of her eating her aunt's food, and all of a sudden all eyes turn to her and her aunt. It's just a really fun, cozy mystery. As I said, the characters are wonderful. I really enjoyed them. Detective Park is idiot and I don't enjoy him, but he stays true to his character the whole time, so I can't really complain, although he does get a little bit more tolerable towards the end. But be prepared, if you pick this up, to be driven crazy by Detective Park. That's all I'm going to say. The next book I finished was an ngARC from Gemma Halliday Publishing, and that is Diamonds, Pies, and Dead Guys by Jennifer Fischetto. This is the fifth book in the Gianna Mancini mystery series. Gianna is a medium. She is able to see and talk to dead people. People around her cannot see dead people, and it always is causes some humorous situations. It isn't as funny as the fourth book, which I read just a couple months ago, but it was still really entertaining and I really liked it, and I will continue with this series. It's fun. The next book that I finished is an audiobook, and that is Escape by Sid Fleischman. This is the story of the great Houdini. This is the story of the great Houdini. Now, I found this biography to be really interesting, pretty engaging, but it's kind of weird to follow because Houdini was so private about his life and very misleading about his life. So it's hard to tell if the information Sid Fleischman has is actually true information or not. And so in that way, it was kind of different. But it was kind of an interesting thing to listen to. the stories about Houdini were fairly interesting. And I really enjoy it anytime any book mentions Wisconsin in it. And of course, Houdini famously says that his hometown is Appleton, Wisconsin. We learn in this book that that is not in fact true. However, he did live there for a good portion of his life. Yeah, worth a read. The next book that I finished was What's Done in Darkness by Laura McHugh. This was an ARC from NetGalley. And I found this book to be so propulsive and just was not something that I wanted to put down at all. And I absolutely loved it. We have a 17-year-old girl, Sarah Beth, who is kidnapped, and 1 week later, after her 18th birthday, she is found on the side of the road covered in blood. She ends up leaving the very religious community that her parents are part of because nobody there believes that she was actually kidnapped and didn't just run away. 5 years later, she is approached by a detective, Nick Farrow, and he thinks that there's some disappearances that could be connected with her disappearance 5 years earlier. She has to open up all those wounds of the past if she's going to help him. And she does, in fact, decide that she will help him, or try to, at least. It is very moving, very engaging, and very suspenseful. And I absolutely recommend this to anybody looking for a good thrill. I loved it a lot. The next book that I read, I listened to, that's Whatever After, number 13, Spill the Beans. Here, Abby and Jonah have a magic mirror in their basement that transports them to different fairy tales, and they get there, they mess it up accidentally, and they have to fix it. This one, we're going into Jack and the Beanstalk, which happens to be Jonah's favorite. He asks for it every single time they go in, and here we are, 13th book. He finally gets his way. It's really fun. Whenever I want a nice little palate cleanser, I grab one of these because they're cute, quirky, funny, and I just really like them. So that is Spill the Beans by Sarah Mlynowski. The next book that I finished was Songs in Ursa Major by Emma Brody. This was another ARC from NetGalley. It came out on June 22nd. I really enjoyed this one as well. It is a fictionalized account of the real life story of Joni Mitchell and James Taylor. So Jane Quinn is the main female character here, and she is kind of thrust into stardom when Jesse Reed, the main male character, doesn't show up for his gig at a local music festival. And it shows the rises and falls and setbacks of her journey. She is a wonderfully strong character, and there are times when you just want to kind of yell at her, but then there's also times where you're like, yeah, stand up for yourself. That's awesome. It's just really, really good. And I liked it a lot. Definitely there's some steamy parts, so watch for that, and definite drug use and mental health issues are talked about at length. So watch out for those trigger warnings as well. I don't remember if I said or not, but this does take place during the 60s and the 70s. So the next book I listened to right after Spill the Beans, I listened to Whatever After Special Edition number 2. So in the special editions, they go into full-length novels, and this one they jumped into The Wizard of Oz. And Abby, in the special editions, jumps in with her friends instead of Jonah. It's a lot of fun. It really will make you want to watch The Wizard of Oz or The Great and Powerful Oz, which actually follows the book a lot more closely. So a lot of fun, definitely. The next book that I listened to was Night of the Twisters by Ivy Ruckman. It was a prompt in Whatever-a-thon to reread a old comfort read. Night of the Twisters is one of my favorite books from when I was old for it when it came out. Like when I read it for the first time, I was older than the intended audience. I loved it. Part of the reason I loved it so much, honestly, has a lot to do with the fact that I love the movie. And I love the movie partly because it stars Devon Sawa, who is just adorable. I watched a lot of his movies when I was younger. Anyway, the book is delightful. It has these really strong characters. I love it. I was kind of looking at it as a read aloud next year, and definitely will be using it. So that's The Night of the Twisters by Ivy Ruckman. The next book that I finished was Samira Surfs by Roxana Giraz. And this was an ARC from NetGalley. It's a novel in verse, middle grade. Loved it so much. We have Samira. Her and her family fled Burma, Myanmar, to Bangladesh by way of the river. And in the process, her grandparents were swallowed and disappeared. She lost her grandparents. So throughout the whole book, she is dealing with the grief from that, and also dealing with being a refugee in a new country in Bangladesh. And refugees were not very tolerated. Refugees that were there were mad at new refugees. It was kind of a crazy situation. Thankfully, Samira meets some girls who enjoy surfing, and she gets into surfing. And it kind of saves her in a lot of ways. And it's so fun to read. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. The last book that I finished was a wonderful ending to a wonderful reading month, and that was CC Rios and the Desert of Souls by Kayla Rivera. This was a book that I unboxed from the bookshelf Thomasville shelf subscription. It is a delightful story that uses Mexican folklore and just propels onward from there. Cece grew up thinking that she was cursed because she was approached by a criatura when she was 7 years old. As a child of the sun god, she should have fire in her soul instead of water, which she is said to have. Therefore, she's kind of a black sheep of the family. Her sister, Juana, is, just the perfect child and chosen for all of the activities and just wonderful. And she's always kind of living in her sister's shadow. One day, one night, she is out beyond the town lines. Her sister follows her, and El Sombreron, the bride stealer, steals Juana and takes her to Death Alley. CC Rios then decides that the fact that her sister has disappeared and is unreachable is not a fact, and she will, in fact, get her back. She decides to tame a creatura in order to get herself to Death Alley. It's just beautiful. It's a wonderful book. Highly, highly recommend this book. It's as beautiful as its cover, really. So there you go. Those are the 19 books that I read in June. It was a beautiful reading month. In terms of whatever-a-thon, I had over 9,000 points, which I thought was pretty good. And it was just a lot of fun. I would love to know down in the comments what your favorite books were in the month of June. I would love to know what you are planning to read in July and anything else that you would like to say about bookish life. Until next time, I will see you later. Happy reading. Bye.